Hi, my name is Morgan Nutt, and I'm doing my persuasive speech on why PEDs should be allowed in professional sports. Since the beginning of time, humans have always tried their best to gain whatever advantage they could against their competitor. The first recorded use of performance-enhancing drugs was when Thomas Hicks won an Olympic marathon after receiving an injection of cetirizine in the middle of the race. This was only the beginning of a long line of athletes who would use PEDs to get ahead in their respective sport. Seeing that there were no official rules against the use of these drugs, athletes would abuse them over and over without penalty. It wasn't until 1928 when the use of PEDs finally began to be banned from professional sports. Although technically illegal, the rule was not entirely enforced. In fact, most official sports organizations would intentionally turn their backs on players using these drugs, as it provides a much more entertaining experience for the fans. For this reason, the use of PEDs in professional sports should not be illegal. In baseball in the late 1990s and early 2000s was known as the steroid era. It was known as this because of the high numbers of players who were suspected of using performance-enhancing drugs at the time. To most baseball fans, this was the most exciting time of baseball. Offense was at an all-time high, which appealed to the fans. Organizations loved this and did not care what made their players perform so well. This is why most players were not tested for doping, even though it was illegal to use. Sporting events with more action happening brings more attention to the teams. This makes the public want to go watch their local sports team. In this situation, both of the fans and organizations running the sports teams win. If the use of performance-enhancing drugs became legal, we as fans would witness events that had previously never seemed possible. In 1998, baseball fans watched eagerly as the St. Louis Cardinals slugger Mark McGwire chased Roger Maris's single-season home run record. On September 8, 1998, millions of fans watched as he hit his 70th home run to break the 38-year record. In an article by Matt Foley, it was stated that we can't officially tell how much performance-enhancing drugs actually helped McGwire in his chase for becoming baseball immortality. The question, though, is essentially unanswerable. We can't know the extent to which performance-enhancing drugs helped McGwire increase his power and perhaps dodge injury. Even though these steroids were proven to increase the rate at which muscle mass were achieved, it takes much more than just muscle to hit home runs in the major leagues. Players master their swings for years and years in order to consistently create contact. Having brute strength can only help so much. Amazingly enough, this record that stood for so long would be broken just 3 years later by San Francisco Giant Barry Bonds. The popular question at the time was how a 38-year record that no one before McGwire had even come close to was being broken in just 3 years. The answer, of course, was performance-enhancing drugs. Years after, both players were constantly in suspicion of taking performance-enhancing drugs. Bond would eventually come clean and admit to the usage, while McGwire still has not officially confessed. It wasn't until years after these records were broken that fans began to discredit these players for their amazing seasons. During the time they accomplished this, no one cared how it was done. They were just happy to experience it. Fans' attendance during the time that these athletes played were at an all-time high. Fans from across the whole world would come watch these players do what many thought would never be possible. The most popular argument against the use of steroids is that it gives the players who use these drugs an unfair advantage. The primary reason why performance-enhancing drugs are outlawed in professional sports by the United States Anti-Doping Agency is that they have been deemed to give the users an unfair and unmerited advantage over the rest of the field. While this might be true, no players would be at a disadvantage if performance-enhancing drugs were available to all players. Not only would the playing field suddenly be even for all players, it would be at a higher level. A huge part of watching sports is witnessing the very peak of human athletic ability, and legalizing performance-enhancing drugs would help athletes climb even higher. Steroids and doping will help pitchers to throw harder, home runs go further, cyclists to charge for longer, and sprinters to test the very limits of human speed. At the same time, legalizing performance-enhancing drugs would make life much easier for professional sports organizations currently tasked with managing convoluted anti-doping policies. There is a blurry line, for instance, between what is and what isn't an improper performance enhancer. Major sports associations have strict limits on stimulants like epinephrine and methamphetamine, but no restriction on caffeine use. If players using performance-enhancing drugs are at an advantage over other players, then players who have had some surgeries should be banned as well. For example, MLB pitchers who have torn their collateral ligament of the tremendous stress they put on their elbows will undergo a surgery called a Tommy John. This surgery involves a physician taking a tendon from the patient's forearm or hamstring to repair the damaged ligament. After 2 years of recommended rehabilitation, pitchers claim they are able to throw harder than they did before the surgery. How long will it take players before they will abuse certain surgeries just to get ahead? Soon enough, every player will want to have surgeries performed on them so that their body can reach a higher potential without having to work for it. Doing this can lead to complications in surgery and further damage a player's body without intending to. Receiving surgery when it is not needed is dangerous and moronic. Another argument against the use of performance-enhancing drugs is the dangers of abusing the steroids. Blood boosters such as epinephrine, for example, increase the oxygen-carrying capacity of blood beyond the individual's natural capacity. Your body is not supposed to go through what some of these drugs offer to the user. The most popular types of performance-enhancing drugs taken are testosterone boosters. These drugs are meant for teenagers who are going through a delayed puberty and need extra testosterone to get their body on track with everyone else that is their age. When taken by someone who doesn't have a need for them, the side effects can be dangerous or even deadly. Some of these side effects include acne, stunted bone growth, breast tissue development, shrinking of the testicles, a reduction in sperm production, and most deadly, liver damage. An athlete who is abusing these drugs and then suddenly stops is also putting their body at high risk. When the body is producing so much fake testosterone, it can no longer produce natural testosterone when off of the drugs. Detractors will argue that steroids and doping can pose these health risks to the athletes involved, but athletes undertake serious health risks by simply walking onto the field or straddling a bike. Just last year, a media car ran Johnny off of the road during the Tour de France, sending him headlong into barbed wire. Redskins quarterback Joe Theismann famously had his leg broken and career ended mid-game, and the devastating long-term effects of concussions are rapidly becoming apparent. Plus, if performance enhancers were made legal, then they could safely be distributed and regulated so that players aren't forced to rely on shady back alley transactions for untested drugs. With many never-ending wants of players to be the best, performance-enhancing drugs give man this opportunity at a much easier cost. Although some of these things are being frowned upon, professional sports legalizing these drugs would only increase the interest into their field as it was possible for providing more entertainment experience to fans.